You're listening to a New York Jets episode of the Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the team's latest goings-on as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, Jets fans! Welcome to my 2021 New York Jets offseason preview here on the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk. And let me just say that this offseason preview is going to be a lot better than last year's. Last year, the audio quality was garbage. It was raining outside my house. It was late at night, so I was trying to keep my voice down. Yet somehow, the audio was still peaking. This year is a lot better. I actually know how to control some things now. My office now has soundproofing. It's not the dead of night. The quality of the audio in this show is going to be a lot better. The content has always been good. It's just the audio quality that could be improved. Again, thank you for sticking with me through all that. Now I actually know how to fix some things. I like to start all my off-season previews with season recaps. How did we get here? Well, I really can't do that here. I've recapped every New York Jets game this year. I've run out of ways to say they sucked. So instead of doing a true season recap, the better way to start this is to determine whose fault this season was. And in my opinion, you have to pin the blame on three people: Joe Douglas, Sam Darnold, and Adam Gase. Does Chris Johnson deserve some blame too? Absolutely. Big Gase supporter. Said he was coaching to where football is going. Then fired McCagnon after Gase was already there. The guy doesn't know a damn thing about football. Thank God he's not going to be running the Jets for too much longer. No one's going to be mistaking Woody Johnson for Robert Kraft anytime soon, but Woody is a million times better than his brother. I'm going to share with you an exercise that I've done all throughout the season. And I've tweeted this out in the past at RealJacobValk. I've brought it up before on this show. I think it's the only fair way to do a season recap of the Jets. How much of the blame do you give Joe Douglas? How much of the blame do you give Sam Darnold? And how much of the blame do you give Adam Gase? And as the season's gone on, my numbers have changed. This is what I've landed on. 65% Joe Douglas, 20% Sam Darnold, and 15% Adam Gase. I've said this before. I'll say it again. No one could make this Jets roster look any better than 2-14. You want to tell me a better coach would have beaten the Raiders? They would have beaten the Broncos? They would have beaten the Chargers? You don't know that. You don't know if a different coach would have had the Jets as close as they were. It's easy to say that a better coach would have won all the close games. But the reality is, it's not enough to say Adam Gase is dreadful. A better coach would have beaten all these teams. Would those coaches have done different things? Absolutely. No way a better coach blitzes on an obvious passing down. Sends the house, of course Derek Carr is going to throw a touchdown. I'm still not over that. That's one of the worst losses in New York Jets history. But you don't know if a different coach would have had it that close. It's the butterfly effect. Once you change this variable, you're going to get unforeseen consequences. So no, a better coach wouldn't have gone 2-14. I strongly believe that the New York Jets, if Bill Belichick was their head coach, if Bill Walsh was their head coach, if Vince Lombardi was their head coach, whoever was their head coach, this team would have gone 2-14. That is on the general manager. That is on the roster that he put out there. And all the failures that led up to the end of this season. Letting Robbie Anderson walk. Failing to sufficiently upgrade the offensive line. Hallelujah, you drafted Mekhi Becton. Fan-freaking-tastic. It's not like that was an exotic pick. You can go back to before the NFL draft. The mock draft I did with Nick. I said the Jets were going to take Mekhi Becton. Were there other options? Of course there were other options. Tristan Wirfs, Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, Henry Ruggs. There's no question. But it's not like Douglas picked this guy out of a no-name school. No one had heard of him. And he turned into a guy who, in my opinion, should have made the Pro Bowl. Becton should have made the Pro Bowl. Him and Quentin Williams. Becton was one of many guys that Joe Douglas could have taken. Did he get the pick right? It seems it. It's more likely than not that Mekhi Becton will make multiple Pro Bowls. Can I say that definitively? No. The guy's had injury concerns. It's only one season. I've seen fantastic rookies flame out before. But it is so far so good. There's no question. Douglas does get some credit for picking Becton, but it's certainly not enough to wipe out the failure that was Connor McGovern. The Jets are stuck with him. They can't move on from him. That was the only offensive lineman that Joe Douglas signed in free agency that he can't move on from this year. And of course, he's the worst of the bunch. Out of the 5 starters, Becton, Lewis, McGovern, Van Roten, and Fant, McGovern was the worst. It's not even close. And let me tell you, Van Roten and Fant haven't set the world on fire either. Joe Douglas in free agency was an unmitigated disaster. Failing to add a pass rusher. Failing to add quality corners. Pierre Desir The only guy that Douglas signed as a cornerback from outside the organization couldn't even make it through the season with the team. That's how dreadful he was. He couldn't make it for the New York Jets. Imagine how bad you are. And I don't want to hear this nonsense that Douglas was forbidden from spending money. The only guy who ever said that was Manish Mehta. A guy who was so bad at his job that he's now been removed from the beat. Do you have any idea how rare that is? To be so bad at your job as a beat writer that you leave because of quality, not moving on to a different organization or retiring. That never happens. No, I don't believe that Joe Douglas was given spending restrictions. Douglas has denied that. Chris Johnson has denied that. The only person that said that is Manish Mehta. And I don't trust Mehta as far as I can throw him. I believe that this was another John Idzik situation. A guy who had the freedom to spend money but chose not to. Who made the conscious decision not to. This guy has a reputation of being a great drafter. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. He hit on Becton. Fantastic. Not an exotic pick. He hit on Denzel Mims. Wunderbar. Look who was available with the 59th overall pick when the Jets were on the clock. Douglas traded down to get Mims. Give him a freaking medal. Who else was he going to take? Everyone else we could take was gone. Chase Claypool, gone. Jalen Johnson, gone. Trayvon Diggs, gone. AJ Epenesa, gone. Van Jefferson, gone. It had to be Denzel Mims. There was no one else. There was no one else who made sense. It's not like Douglas knew Mims was going to be there when he traded down 11 spots. There were a bunch of guys that he could have picked. I just named them. Mims was the last one available. That's why Mims was taken. Not because of some great scouting by Joe Douglas, because Denzel Mims was the last guy available that made sense for the New York Jets to take. Oh, and this is my favorite thing. The people saying that Douglas is a great drafter, they just stop at Mims. Becton and Mims, that's it. Look at what he did after that. You can't just say this guy hit on 2 picks, and all of a sudden he's Jimmy Johnson. It doesn't work that way. Douglas had 7 other picks. Let's look at what he did with them. Ashton Davis, terrible. Jabari Zuniga, terrible. LaMichael Pirine, didn't set the world on fire. James Morgan was so bad that he couldn't even get on the field. That's how bad he must have looked in practice. No one wanted to see Joe Flacco play. Let's see Morgan play. Let's see what the 4th rounder can do. He was so bad that he was left inactive for Mike White. Mike freaking White. No one wants to see Mike White play. Cameron Clark, so bad he couldn't even get on the field. The Jets were shuffling offensive linemen in like crazy. Pat Elflein, Connor McDermott, Josh Andrews, Chuma Edoga. Cameron Clark couldn't get in. Bryce Hall didn't set the world on fire. Braden Mann, fine punter. You've got to do more than hitting on your first 2 picks to say that you're a great drafter. 2 years ago, this team was 7-9. In Joe Douglas's first full offseason, in charge of the team, he put together a roster that went 2-14. It absolutely boggles my mind how throughout this season, Douglas has escaped most of the blame. As the losing streak got bigger and bigger, you heard some criticism of Douglas, but not as much as Gase. I think that's unfair. I don't think anyone can make these pieces work. The biggest piece of all that no one could make work is Sam Darnold. As far as I'm concerned, we can already write Darnold off as one of the biggest busts in NFL history. I'm not kidding. He's right up there with RG3. He's right up there with Jamarcus Russell. He's right up there with Ryan Leaf. He's right up there with Heath Schuler. He's right up there with Rick Mirer. Don't give me this nonsense that he wasn't in a good system. He wasn't put in a position to succeed. Take a look at what Baker Mayfield did in Cleveland. Baker Mayfield, in his rookie year, with Hugh Jackson and Greg Williams as his head coaches, completed over 63% of his passes for over 3,700 yards and 27 touchdowns. The year after that, he regressed a little bit, but not as much as some people would have you believe. The completion percentage went down, but the yards went up. The touchdowns only went down by 5. That's not terrible. The interceptions went up, but the point is, Mayfield didn't have a disastrous season. This year, Mayfield has put it all together. The completion percentage went back up, the yards went down, but the touchdowns went up, the interceptions went down. Mayfield looks like the real deal. But you never wrote him off as a bust. Never. Not with Hugh Jackson, not with Freddie Kitchens. You know why? Because he was still throwing for over 3,000 yards. He was still playing every game. He was throwing over 20 touchdowns. Sam Darnold has done none of those things. This guy just continues to make bad decisions. For the first time in his NFL career, he finished with more interceptions than touchdowns. He was trying to fit balls into windows that weren't there. He didn't know when to give up on a play. He couldn't identify defenses. He couldn't do anything. Sam Darnold only had 2 games this year where he threw multiple touchdown passes. I mean, watch the games. Does Darnold have moments where he looks really good? Yes. But you know what? Put any quarterback out there, and he'll have at least one moment where he looks really good. Let me tell you, Mitchell Trubisky has had some good moments this year. Dwayne Haskins had a few good moments. Daniel Jones has had some good moments. I'm not confident in any of those guys. The reality is the kid's a bust. It's been 3 years. You've seen nothing. No winning seasons. No chance at the playoffs. Here's how bad it was. We were praising Darnold for having a streak of games where he didn't throw an interception. He had a 3-game streak where he did that this year. Seahawks, Rams, Browns. In 2 of those games, his completion percentage was less than 54%. In all 3 of those games, he didn't throw for more than 210 yards. He was sacked multiple times in every one of those games. This kid is without question the biggest bust in New York Jets history. And this is a team that drafted Vernon Goldston, Dwayne Robertson, Blair Thomas, and Johnny Lamb Jones. You've got to be some kind of bad to be worse than those guys. Let me tell you, when Darnold goes, I'm going to be rooting against him. I've seen some Jets fans say, hey, I wish him nothing but the best. He seems like a good kid, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. I have nothing against Sam Darnold personally. I've never met the guy. But I don't want him to succeed. How bad does that look? How bad does it look if Sam Darnold fails for the Jets and then succeeds somewhere else? That's a bad look for the Jets. I don't care about his career. I have no stake in his career. Let's compare it to Ryan Tannehill. What would have been a better look for the Miami Dolphins? If Tannehill had failed with the Titans, or if he keeps succeeding with the Titans? It's a better look if he just fails, right? Because you failed to develop him. He couldn't work with you, but he's working with someone else. That's a bad look for the Dolphins. It's the same thing with the Jets. No, I don't want Sam Darnold to succeed in the NFL. Yes, I'll be rooting against him. I'm not saying he shouldn't be given a means to support himself and his family. Let him go back to USC. Let him get his degree. Maybe he can get into coaching. Maybe he can start a career outside of football. I don't want Sam Darnold to end up homeless or anything. That's ridiculous. But I don't want him to succeed in the NFL. Fortunately, though, I don't think I have anything to worry about. As easy as I've been on Adam Gase, I understand that he's a below-average coach. And that's putting it very, very lightly. There's no excuse to go 2-14. The second worst season in Jets history. The worst was 96, when they went 1-15. I mean, let me tell you, it's pretty bad when you're mentioned in the same breath as guys like Kotite, Lou Holtz, and Charlie Winner. I understand all of Gase's failures, believe me. It's the right decision to get rid of Gase. But I'll tell you, I don't think he's as bad as Kotite. I don't think he's as bad as Holtz. I don't think he's as bad as Winner. I don't think he's as bad as Hugh Jackson. Or Rod Marinelli. Or John McKay. Or David Shula. Any of those guys. I think he was dealt a dreadful hand, and he couldn't make good-tasting lemonade out of spoiled lemons. You know what? I don't think anyone could. Nothing makes me more upset than the fact that Joe Douglas, the man who I hold most responsible for this 2-14 season, is still going to have a job. Darnold and Gase can go. They're easy guys to get rid of. It's the right decision. But I'm telling you, if I was Woody Johnson, coming back from the United Kingdom, and I saw that my team went 2-14, after going 7-9, get rid of Joe Douglas. I understand that this was his plan to build for this year. but I don't agree with the plan. I have no faith in his ability to execute the plan. The plan involves drafting well. Douglas missed on the majority of his picks. You want to tell me it's too early to write them off? That cuts both ways then. If it's too early to write off guys like Davis and Zuniga, then it's too early to anoint Becton and Mims as future building blocks for the Jets. The simple fact is, I don't trust Joe Douglas to oversee this incredibly important offseason. And I know we hear that every year. This offseason is the most important one. You can't afford to get it wrong, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. I hate to sound cliche, I really do. But this is one of the most important off-seasons in Jets history. This is the highest draft pick they've had since 1996. According to overthecap.com, as it stands right now, without doing anything, the Jets are going to have over $70 million in cap space. I don't want to say they can go worst to first, because the Bills are a really, really, really good team. But assuming those assets are used correctly by the GM, big assumption, a good coach will be able to lead a team that can fight for a playoff spot. I don't want to say there's a playoff mandate or anything. That's a big thing that some Jets fans have. There's no playoff mandate, blah, blah, blah. This team just went 2-14. This team is going to have, most likely, a first-time head coach. To give them a playoff mandate is setting them up for failure. But back to the head coach. I've spent a lot of time thinking about who the next head coach of the Jets should be. At one point, I had a list of like 20 guys. I've narrowed the list down. I'm not going to go crazy in depth on all of them. Otherwise, we'll be here until New Year's Day 2022. But I am going to go through my A1 guys. There are other guys who I wouldn't mind, but these are my A1 guys. The top guy was my top guy when the Jets hired Adam Gase. I had Gase 5th on my list. I had David Shaw 4th, Chris Peterson 3rd, Matt LaFleur 2nd, and Eric Bieniemy 1st. You know what? I still want Bieniemy. It's about damn time that this guy be given a shot to lead an NFL team. Last year, this guy won a Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes is doing things that I didn't even know were possible. These plays that the Chiefs are running out are things that no one's ever seen before. It's fair to wonder how much credit Bieniemy gets for all the Chiefs' success. I mean, realize, he's coordinating an offense that's led by the best player in the NFL today. And Andy Reid is probably a future Hall of Famer. It does come with some risk, there's no question, but everyone's going to bat for Bieniemy. Andy Reid has said countless times that he deserves to be a head coach. He fits the mold of the young offensive guru. He's been interviewed countless times by countless teams. I don't know what those teams are missing. The Jets are lucky that they can still get Bieniemy, a guy who they should have hired 2 years ago. Get the hire right now. Better late than never. The next guy up is Lincoln Riley. I've debated between him and Dabo Swinney for a while, but I'm going to go with Riley. What he's been able to do at Oklahoma with different quarterbacks is nothing short of incredible. Baker Mayfield, Heisman Trophy winner. Kyler Murray, Heisman Trophy winner. Jalen Hurts, not a Heisman Trophy winner, but still had a really good season for Oklahoma in 2019. And this year, Spencer Rattler ended up putting together a really good season. I don't see him having a good career in the NFL or anything. In fact, I've been low on him all year, but Lincoln Riley coached him up to a really good season. Completed over 67% of his passes for over 3,000 yards, 28 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. They just destroyed Florida in the Cotton Bowl. If Lincoln Riley is gonna leave Oklahoma, which I'm not saying is gonna happen, there's no guarantee of that, the Jets need to be in on him. They also need to be in on Dabo Swinney, a guy who's been incredibly successful at Clemson. Coached up Deshaun Watson. Coached up Trevor Lawrence. Imagine the possibility of Dabo Swinney coming to the Jets and then working out a way for the Jets to then get Trevor Lawrence. That is a match made in heaven. I think it would take a lot for Swinney to leave. The guy basically runs the state of South Carolina. But go out and spend some money, Woody Johnson. I think Dabo Swinney would be a sensational NFL head coach. Going back to the NFL for the next guy, I have Brian Daboll just missing out on an Olympic medal. Let me tell you, Daboll is going to be at the top of a lot of people's lists. What he's done with Josh Allen this year is nothing short of sensational. And he runs that Bills offense. It's not Sean McDermott. McDermott's a defensive guy. That's how he got the Bills' job, because of what he did with the Panthers' defense. Daboll has free reign over that offense. And every year, Josh Allen has gotten better and better and better. His rookie year didn't look that good. His sophomore year, he took a big jump. Still didn't look great, but again, big jump. The Bills made the playoffs. This year, Allen is an MVP candidate. I'm going to read you his stats through week 16. He's completed over 69% of his passes for over 4,300 yards, 34 touchdowns, and just 9 interceptions. I look at Daboll's ability to do that with a guy like Allen, who was really inconsistent coming out of Wyoming. Really raw. A lot of people weren't crazy about him. And I say if he can do that with Josh Allen, imagine what he can do for my young quarterback. Whether it's Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields. Moving on to defense now. The first defensive guy on my list is Robert Saleh. For all the credit that Kyle Shanahan got for the Niners Super Bowl run last year, Saleh should have gotten a lot of that credit. This guy, for the last 2 seasons, has put together fantastic 49ers defenses. And you take a look at all the injuries that the Niners have had this year. No Nick Bosa, no Dee Ford. Saleh was able to make lemonade out of the lemons that are Deion Jordan and Jordan Willis. Jordan Willis, a former Jet. A guy who, when I saw he was traded, it was like, hey, great job, Joe Douglas. This guy isn't that great. Well, put together 7 solid games for the Niners. He had 2.5 sacks. That's not bad. If you want to go back to your roots, the Jets used to always hire defensive guys. Before Adam Gase, the last offensive guy they hired was Rich Kotite. After that, all defense. If you want to go back to that, go with Saleh. Now moving on to a guy who I really didn't give much thought to until I saw him mentioned on NFL.com by, I think it was Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero. And that's Dan Mullen, Florida's head coach. I'll say this, I don't mind it. It would make perfect sense. Offensive guy, that's where the NFL is going. He's had a lot of recent success at Florida. Every year he's been with the Gators, they've been in a New Year's Six bowl game. And you just saw the year that Kyle Trask had. A fantastic season. He'd be my pick to win the Heisman Trophy. Trask got better every year he was under Mullen. That's what you look for when you're evaluating a college coach. How good his players get under him. Dan Mullen could work. The only thing I'd be a little scared about is, will he try to convince me to trade down so that way he could take Trask? I don't want to do that. I have a chance at Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields. I don't want Trask. I like Trask, but I don't like him more than Lawrence and Fields. Now moving on to a guy who spurned the Jets in 2019. I have no problem giving it another shot. And that is Matt Campbell. A guy who has turned around 2 college programs. Toledo and ISU. Toledo, before Campbell got there, was a nothing burger. Every year, Campbell was Rockets head coach. They finished with at least 7 wins. In 3 of those years, they finished with 9 wins. Then he goes to ISU and slowly builds that program up. The Cyclones just won the Fiesta Bowl. Breece Hall had a fantastic season. Brock Purdy had a really good season. Matt Campbell is exactly what you look for in a college head coach. I'm not crazy about ISU. I'd rather shoot higher than that. A team with a track record of appearing in big bowl games. A school like Oklahoma, Clemson, Florida. If I'm going to go the college route, which I'm not opposed to, I'm shooting big. I wouldn't mind Matt Campbell. There are just other college coaches I have ahead of him. Now let's go back to defense and to one of the most respected defensive minds in the NFL, Matt Eberflus. This guy got the job as Colts defensive coordinator through Josh McDaniels. Josh McDaniels was going to be Colts head coach. He hired Eberflus as his defensive coordinator. Then when McDaniels backed out, Frank Reich got the job. He had no previous experience with Eberflus, but he kept Eberflus around, and now he's turned into one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. The Colts under him have always had a stout defense. This year they've ridden it to being the 7th seed in the AFC. Eberflus isn't a household name. There may be some people scratching their heads, but I wouldn't worry too much about that. He's very well respected within the NFL. Like I said, the Colts have always had good defenses under him. Eberflus would be a fine hire. Now moving on to a guy who would definitely get some people scratching their heads. Probably the most controversial guy on this list. Bill O'Brien. Forget the personnel decisions he made. Forget the Tunsil trade. Forget the Hopkins trade. Just look at what he did as a coach. Not an executive. A coach. Bill O'Brien was really successful with the Texans. Excluding this past year, which is fair because he only coached 4 games. He only has 1 losing season. He made the playoffs 4 times. They were really close to knocking off the Chiefs last year. I understand the abysmal personnel decisions that were made by him. If he's hired by the Jets, you have to give him a seat at the table, but don't be beholden to what he says. If he says, I want to trade Quinnen Williams for a 5th round pick, don't do it. Or I want to give up 2 first rounders for this offensive lineman and a 2nd to boot. You don't let him do it. O'Brien's a very good coach. Very good track record of success. Just not when making trades. You don't make him GM. You make him head coach. It's pretty simple. Now for the really crazy guy. The guy who I haven't seen anyone mention as a head coaching candidate, but this is a guy who I'm really high on. A guy who I do think fits the mold of offensive guru. A guy who I've said in the past that I'm high on. Greg Olsen. Under him, Blake Bortles threw for about 4,000 yards both seasons they were together. He threw over 20 touchdowns both seasons. Then he goes to the Raiders. Derek Carr puts up really good seasons. Josh Jacobs is turning into one of the best young running backs in the NFL. I think Greg Olsen could work if given the opportunity. It's high risk because in all those years that I mentioned, his teams never made the playoffs. I understand the risk there, but this guy's been in the NFL since 2003. He's been around John Gruden for a long time. He'll be able to put together a staff of really smart guys. It's risky, there's no question, but I think it could work. The last guy is someone who's been frequently mentioned as a premier candidate for the Jets. Joe Caporoso has said in the past that he wants this guy to be the next head coach of the Jets. And let me tell you, I see why. It's Don Martindale, Ravens defensive coordinator. You take a look at the past Ravens defensive coordinators, they usually go on to big things in the NFL. Marvin Lewis was with the Bengals for a long time. Rex Ryan made back-to-back AFC title game appearances with the Jets. Chuck Pagano made the playoffs with the Colts his first 3 years there. Martindale could join that list. Like I said, the Jets have gone that route before, and it's worked. The reason I don't like it is because he's the opposite of Greg Olsen. He just strikes me as the kind of guy who, while he wouldn't do a terrible job, I don't see him doing a great job. It seems like he'd hit a single or a double rather than a grand slam. I want to hit a grand slam. I wouldn't mind Martindale. Safe hire. But I do think the Jets can do better. He would not be my number one guy. Not even close. There are a few other guys I want to mention. Boomer Esiason on WFAN said that Bill Cowher could be interested in coaching the Jets. Now, Cowher has denied that. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think he's ever going to leave CBS, but it's worth bringing up. Boomer and Cowher know each other. If Bill Cowher is seriously interested in coaching the Jets, give him whatever he wants. He's the A1 guy. Not Bieniemy, not Riley, not Sweeney. Bill Cowher. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's worth bringing up. On the other end of that spectrum, two guys who could get the job, but I don't want, are Joe Brady and Jim Harbaugh. Joe Brady would be probably the worst hire the Jets could make. I struggle to think of anyone worse. This guy is 31 years old. He only has 1 year of play calling experience under his belt. He did not call plays at LSU. Did he help Steve Ensminger? No question. In fact, he may have called a few plays here and there, but he was not the primary play caller. That was Steve Ensminger. And if I'm looking past that, let's take a look at how the Panthers' offense did this year. For starters, the team went 5-11. Everyone on this list, with the exception of Bill O'Brien, and even then it's not fair to include him, because he only coached 4 games this year, comes from a more successful team. Teams that fought for playoff spots, or in some cases, got into the playoffs. To hire the offensive coordinator of a 5-11 team would be lunacy. Is there a chance that Joe Brady turns into a good NFL coach? Yes. He's still young. He can turn his career around. It's way too early to give up on him. But to give him the keys to the kingdom at 31 years of age, when his team did nothing this year, that would be criminal. The Panthers' offense this year, through week 16, again, that's when I'm recording this, is 20th in total yards and 23rd in total points scored. How do you look at the offensive coordinator for that team and say, this is my guy? There's no way that ends well. I wouldn't even give Joe Brady an interview. Jim Harbaugh has also been mentioned because Woody Johnson has gone after Harbaugh before. But don't you get the sense that football has just passed him by? Don't you get the sense that he had his moment in the sun, and from there it's just been all downhill? Look how bad Michigan has been. They went 2-4 this year. The year before, they were 9-4. Jim Harbaugh, as Michigan's head coach, has never beaten OSU and hasn't won a bowl game since the 2015 Citrus Bowl. If Jim Harbaugh wants to go back into the NFL, make him an offensive coordinator. And even then, make him the offensive coordinator for a head coach that has an offensive background. I wouldn't give him full oversight. I understand that Harbaugh has been successful in the past. There's a part of me that likes Jim Harbaugh. But most of me realizes that this guy's best days are behind him. Michigan has regressed under him a lot. I just don't see that working. Whoever becomes the next Jets head coach is going to have a tough decision to make. What do you do at quarterback? Even though I just said that Sam Darnold is one of the biggest busts in NFL history, I understand the argument for keeping him. I disagree with it. I strongly disagree with it. But it's not the kind of argument where I'd shut my ears and scream, la 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 la, I'm not listening. Over. Go back to 2018 for a minute. Most people thought that Sam Darnold was the best quarterback in that draft. It was a surprise when Mayfield went 1. And if you're of the opinion that the Jets did everything possible to sabotage his career, it's a very reasonable point of view to say, hey, if I get this job, I want to give it one more shot with Darnold. Let me see if I can fix him. Here's the thing. Sam Darnold will get another opportunity in the NFL. There are still some coaches that really like him. For whatever reason, they see potential there. I don't. But I promise you, someone's going to give up at least a day 2 pick for Sam Darnold. And they're going to give him a chance to be his long-term quarterback. While I disagree with it, I disagree with the notion that Sam Darnold can turn his career around. There's a little bit of the argument that makes sense. 2018, his head coach was Todd Bowles. His offensive coordinator was Jeremy Bates. You can't do much worse than that. Or maybe you can, since you saddled him with Adam Gase. I don't know if Gase is worse than Bowles. It's close. It's closer than you'd think. And it's close between Gase and Bates, too. Who's worse in running an offense? If you loved this kid coming out of USC, and you see the support staff around him, coaches and players, it's reasonable to say, you know what? I still think I can fix this guy. I disagree with it. No one hates Sam Darnold more than me, but it's not an insane argument. However, I don't see Joe Douglas signing off on that. If any one of those guys that I just mentioned says, I want to give it a go with Sam Darnold, that'll probably cause Douglas to cross him off his list. Realize, Joe Douglas has no connection to Sam Darnold. Joe Douglas didn't draft him. Darnold was the quarterback of his team that went 2-14. When new GMs come in, they want to bring in their own quarterback. Joe Douglas didn't have that opportunity his first couple seasons running the team. Now he does. He's going to use it. The reality is there's no chance that Sam Darnold is the Jets quarterback next year. If you believe in him, if you want to give him a chance to turn him around, I understand. I want to give Dwayne Haskins a chance to turn his career around. I'm not saying I want him as Jets starting quarterback, but I want him to be given the chance somewhere to learn from a veteran quarterback, a good head coach, a good offensive mind, and he works his way up the depth chart, and maybe, just maybe, he can salvage his career. That's the same argument that people are using for Sam Darnold. I get it. But there's no way that he gets that chance with the Jets. The guy who everyone wants as the Jets starting quarterback in 2021, obviously, is Trevor Lawrence. And I've said this before, but it's never been more true than now. There is a real chance that even though the Jaguars have the first overall pick right now, and the Jets have the second overall pick right now, that the Jets can't get Trevor Lawrence. If you were listening to past episodes of the Jacob Valk Show, I said that Justin Fields needed to have a great Sugar Bowl to reclaim his status as the second best quarterback in this draft. For some people, it was Zach Wilson. Now, the answer is Justin Fields. Anyone who says Wilson is crazy. But Fields did more than be great. He was excellent. He was as close to perfect as you could be. He completed 22 of his 28 passes for 385 yards and 6 touchdowns. Some of those touchdown passes were beautifully thrown deep balls. Deep balls that most NFL quarterbacks wouldn't be able to make. Justin Fields made himself the second best quarterback in this draft by far. It's not even close between him and Wilson. But what he also did was narrow the gap between him and Lawrence. If you go on ESPN.com and you look at their grades of Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, they haven't been updated to reflect what happened in the Sugar Bowl. And I know that for a fact because I checked their grades before the Sugar Bowl started. Trust me, these grades have not been altered yet. Maybe by the time you hear this podcast it will be, but as of this moment in time, it's not. Lawrence is a 97, according to ESPN. Fields is a 91. I promise you that those grades will change at some point in time. Maybe Lawrence won't go down a lot, but Fields probably moved up to a 94 with that performance. And maybe you bump Lawrence down to a 96 since he lost as the quarterback of a better team. That's a very small gap. Everyone was saying that the value of the second overall pick went up. And it did. People are saying that to say that if the Jets wanted to trade down, they could. Or if they wanted to trade for a veteran quarterback, they could. There's another element to that, though. If the gap between Lawrence and Fields has closed, and you as Joe Douglas had your heart set on Trevor Lawrence, you view him as the top quarterback, you can convince the Jaguars to move down one spot. Think about this offer. The Jets first rounder, second overall, the Seahawks first rounder, the Jets first rounder next year, so that's 2022, and a day 2 pick in this coming draft. Is that a lot to give up? To move up just one spot? The answer is yes. But that's the price you pay for not finishing with a winless season. I'll do it for Trevor Lawrence. I'll tell you right now, as God is my witness, I truly believe this. If I was taking over as Jacksonville Jaguars GM, and I'm putting my Jets fandom aside, I'm looking at it for what's the best move for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Jets give me a Godfather offer to move down just one spot, they can have Trevor Lawrence. I'll take Justin Fields. I mean, I was saying this before the Sugar Bowl, that the Jets could maybe talk the Jaguars into moving down one spot. Now, it's not wishful thinking to say that. It's a legitimate view that can be backed up by facts. This is why I got so upset at Jets fans who were rooting for their team to lose. A million things could still happen. I promise you, it's very possible for the New York Jets to move up one spot. Yes, the value of that pick moved up because Justin Fields was absolutely incredible. So you have people saying you could take Fields, don't feel bad about losing Lawrence. Or you could trade that pick for a veteran. But think about it this way. Expand your thinking a little bit. This is a weird example, but I promise you it makes sense. Let's say you're at a pawn shop and you see a Rolex watch that you really like and you want it. But it's $1,000. Let's just make the math easy. Let's say it's $1,000. You don't have $1,000 to spend on a watch. You can only spend $500. That's not going to be enough to get the job done. The pawn shop won't sell you the Rolex. So then some time passes, and you have an item in your collection that just went up in value. Let's say it's a Floyd Little autograph who just died, rest in peace. Let's say the value of that autograph was $300. Now since he's dead, the value has gone up to $500. You can go back to the pawn shop and say, that $1,000 Rolex watch, I have $500 in cash, and I'll give you this Floyd Little autograph that's worth $500. Will you take that? You wouldn't take it before because the value of this item that I had in my collection was less. Now, will you take it? The pawn shop will say yes, most likely. It's no guarantee when dealing with pawn shops, just like it's no guarantee when you're talking about NFL trades. But I promise you, the likelihood that the new Jaguars GM would be amenable to moving down one spot has gone up. And if you're Joe Douglas, I don't care if it's a Godfather offer. I don't care if it's Goff-esque, Wentz-esque, RG3-esque, Darnold-esque. You have to do it. You have to get Trevor Lawrence. You have to get the guy who your fans were screaming for in October by any means necessary. Also, there's one other element to this. According to Ian Rappaport of NFL.com, the Jaguars are eyeing Urban Meyer as Doug Marrone's replacement. Also, further down in the article, Rappaport says that Ryan Day could receive interest also. Where do both of those coaches have connections to? Not Clemson, not BYU, not North Dakota State, not Alabama, OSU. Who goes to OSU? Justin Fields. If the Jaguars hire Urban Meyer or Ryan Day, then they're definitely open to trading down one spot so they can take Fields. They may take Fields first overall, but you don't want to take that chance. Move up one spot, secure the opportunity to get your guy. Get Trevor Lawrence. Let Meyer or Day coach Justin Fields. I'm telling you, It's a distinct possibility. If the Jets can't get Trevor Lawrence, if the new Jaguars GM says, I don't care what you offer, this is my guy, I'm staking my reputation to him, I'm taking this guy, I don't care what you offer me, blah blah blah, then the best thing the Jets can do is trade the second overall pick for a veteran. And they'll have their pick of guys if they choose to go that route. Matthew Stafford's been rumored to be on the trade block for a while. Jimmy Garoppolo can't stay healthy. There's been some speculation that the Niners could move on from him. There's some speculation that the Falcons could move on from Matt Ryan. Carson Wentz also is not long for Philly. I don't want any of those guys. The two veteran quarterbacks that I would trade the second overall pick for are Deshaun Watson and Dak Prescott. In that order. And that's it. Obviously, you would trade it for a guy like Mahomes or Lamar Jackson or someone like that, but obviously that's not going to happen. Watson and Prescott, it's possible. The Texans really don't have a bright future. They were the third worst team in the NFL this year, and they don't even get to reap the benefits of that. Because they traded their pick in the Tunsil deal. Nice job, Bill O'Brien. The Texans are in salary cap hell. As it stands right now, according to overthecap.com, they are $13 million over the salary cap for 2021. Their core is in the prime of their career or maybe just leaving it. The Texans are going to bring in a new GM. That new GM may have a vision of, you know what, we've got to build this team from the ground up. This core that the Texans have had, J.J. Watt, Deshaun Watson, Whitney Merciless, guys like that, it's not going to get the job done. Let's blow this thing up. We're in cap hell. We have no way to get better. We're going to be bad for a while. We've got to blow this thing up. In which case, you would do Deshaun Watson for the second overall pick. You get to build around Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence. You get out of some future cap trouble. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to say that the new GM of the Texans could go into that job with the vision of blowing the team up and starting from scratch. Obviously, in that case, you wouldn't go after Bill O'Brien. That's perfectly fine. But you'd probably be more inclined to go after one of the defensive guys, like Saleh, or Eberflus, or Martindale. If the Jets go the young quarterback route, I don't see them hiring a defensive guy. I see them hiring an offensive guy. With a guy like Watson, there's no need for an offensive guy. You don't need to help Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson is Deshaun Watson. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Bring in a defensive guy. That's what you need the most help on. As for Prescott, the Cowboys are in a battle with him over his long-term value. They've been talking about an extension for a long time. It hasn't happened. Now Prescott's coming off a year where he misses most of the season. The Cowboys could possibly be talked into that. Dak Prescott for the second overall pick. If you don't want to take the chance on him, I understand that, but I'll tell you right now, I would. Before this year, this guy has never had any injury concerns. The Jets have the cap space to give him a huge contract. Dak Prescott is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He's probably top 15, maybe top 10. Now, let me just say that if you would rather the Jets take Justin Fields, if they can't get Lawrence, that's fine. I get that. I like Justin Fields a lot. I never moved off him as the second best quarterback in this draft. Wilson was hot on his heels in my mind, but I always had Fields ahead of Wilson. I like Fields a lot. Jack of all trades, pinpoint accuracy, can throw the deep ball, great frame, 6'3", 228 pounds, mobile in the pocket. He has a quick release. I get that. But if you have the opportunity to take a guy like Deshaun Watson or Dak Prescott, wouldn't you do it? Think about it this way. If you were starting a team from scratch, who would you rather want? Deshaun Watson, Dak Prescott, or Justin Fields? I'm going Watson, Prescott, Fields. It's not an indictment of Fields. It's just, I can get this established NFL quarterback. I'm going to have the cap space to put a really good team around him. I'm still going to have the picks necessary to build a really good young core. I'd rather go that route. If you have Fields ahead of trading for a veteran, that's fine. I get that. But again, my order for solving the quarterback position is Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson or Dak Prescott, and then Justin Fields. So now let's get to who should be cut from the Jets, besides basically everyone. There are 9 guys in particular that I want to move on from. And I'll start with Henry Anderson. This guy is due to make a bunch of money next year. He's set to count for over $9.5 million against the cap. The Jets can save $8.2 million by cutting him. Anderson fell behind some of the younger players on the depth chart, like Foley Fatukasi and John Franklin Myers. He's not a dreadful player. There's a role for him in the league, but for what he's set to make next year, it's better for the Jets to move on from him. The next guy to go is Bless Austin, a guy who the Jets really counted on to be a starting cornerback for him. I didn't think that would work. I thought that was doomed to fail, and I was right. Bless Austin had a really bad season this year. Through 16 weeks, according to Pro Football Focus, he has just a 51.1 overall grade. He was really, really bad. I fully expect the Jets to go after better corners in the offseason. They've got to move on from Bless Austin. If you can't get the job done, I don't want you. It's just that simple. It's not too early to give up on a 6th round draft pick from 2 years ago. The next guy to go is George Fant. He's in the same mold as Anderson. Not a terrible player. There are worse players than him. But his cap hit next year is going to be $9.4 million. If the Jets cut him, they'll save $7.4 million. Fant's not awful, but you can do better than him. Save the money and get free agency right. The next guy to go is Ryan Griffin, another Joe Douglas beauty. Let's sign Ryan Griffin to a big contract extension and then watch him do absolutely nothing. If you knew he wasn't going to be featured in the offense as much as he was last year, why did you sign him to an extension? You stupid man. Anderson this year only had 9 catches for 86 yards. He has a $3.3 million cap hit next year. The Jets can save $1.875 million by cutting him. You gotta do it. The next guy to go is the answer to a trivia question. Who was the corner who got burned on Greg Williams' all-out blitz? The answer is Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson was completely useless this year. I actually liked him coming out of Nebraska. I thought that was a good, undrafted free agent signing by Joe Douglas. But oh my God, he is dreadful. The reality is this guy can't start in the NFL. And if you can't start, I don't want you. Maybe that's unfair to an undrafted rookie, but look, the guy was burned constantly, had a bad game against the Patriots. According to Pro Football Focus, he only has a 48.3 overall grade. That's probably going to go down to reflect what he did against the Patriots. The Jets have to cut him. And they have to cut Connor McDermott, who somehow got signed to an extension by Joe Douglas. Fortunately, it's not a big extension. The Jets can move on from it. They'll save $950,000. It's better to not have any dead cap, but look, I'll give Joe Douglas the benefit of the doubt. He may have had a mini stroke. That's the only reason to sign Connor McDermott to an extension. 46.1 overall grade according to Pro Football Focus through 16 weeks. The reality is he's just not good. He's versatile. I like that. But he doesn't exactly play any position that well. If you're the offensive line genius that everyone says you are, you know to move on from him, Mr. Douglas. The next guy to go is Kyle Phillips. And I kind of feel bad about saying that Phillips should go, because him and I actually have a mutual friend, and he played well in 2019, but he got hurt early this year, only played in 7 games, wasn't all that good when he played, 52.3 overall grade, I think the Jets can do better than him. The next guy to go is Greg Van Roten. Yeah, I'm getting rid of the whole right side of the offensive line. I don't have a choice. Van Roten really wasn't that good. He wasn't terrible. If the Jets were to bring him back, I wouldn't be opposed to it. But there are better guys available. One I'll get into a little later. But I just think there are better options available than Van Roten. I like Van Roten. I did want the Jets to sign him last year. He grew up rooting for the Jets. Wasn't a bad pass blocker this year. It was just his run blocking that was really bad. Again, wouldn't be opposed to keeping him around, but I do think there are better options available. The last guy to go is Trayvon Wesco. He just isn't that good. He's more of a blocking tight end than anything else, and even then, he's not a good blocking tight end. None of his pass blocking stats this year, according to Pro Football Focus, are over 60. In his career, Wesco only has 3 catches. The Jets have to move on from him. The reality is he's just not that good. Now let's get to the re-signings. Believe it or not, there are a few players that I want back. And I'll start with one of the more underrated players on the team, Terrell Basham. A guy who played every game this season, started some, got better as the year went on. He's a quality backup outside linebacker. You don't want him starting in a perfect world, but as a backup, bring him back. Through 16 weeks, according to Pro Football Focus, he has a 64.5 overall grade. Bring him back for a year or two. That makes perfect sense. I actually like Basham. The next guy is the Jets' MVP. In fact, he was voted that by the team, Marcus May. The Jets really need to bring May back more than anyone else. He's been one of their best players since, realistically, 2018. I understand he got hurt in 2018, but he was good before he got hurt. And it would be a really nice message to send. Hey, we'll pay you if you're a safety. You just can't ask for the moon. And you have to wait your turn. As it stands right now, he has an 82.3 overall grade according to Pro Football Focus. It wouldn't surprise me if that went up. The Jets have to bring back Marcus May. The last guy to bring back may surprise you because he got hurt halfway through the season. But this guy has been good with the Jets for the past 2 seasons. It's Brian Poole, one of the best slot corners in the NFL. The Jets need to make a concerted effort to upgrade their corners. They were getting burned constantly. And it doesn't have to do with them being left in one-on-one situations. They were getting burned in zone 2. They can't afford to let Poole go. Maybe he'd be open to another prove-it deal. If not, I have no problem giving him like a 3-year deal. He's that valuable. 77.1 overall grade. Him, Bryce Hall, and Javelin Guidry were the only good corners for the Jets this year. So now let's get into free agency. I know this is going long, but like I've been saying for a while, the only thing to look forward to as a Jets fan since the Broncos game, realistically, was the offseason. I've had a lot of time to think about this. Regardless of what the Jets do at quarterback, they need to add a backup quarterback. And they need to add a premium backup quarterback. They tried it with Joe Flacco. It was a good idea, but it really didn't go that well. Flacco really didn't look that great. You could tell that his best days are way, way, way behind him. You never know when you're going to need a backup quarterback. The Jets need to invest in a premium one. I'll start off my backup quarterback list with a guy who, if his team had their druthers, may not have been a backup. And that's Tyrod Taylor. Realize how he lost his job. He had a punctured lung because the Chargers team doctor messed up an injection. That's the only reason why Justin Herbert got to start in the first place. Would Herbert have started down the line if that error never happened? Probably. But we'll never know when he would have started. There was actually a report that came out when Rex Ryan was Bill's head coach that said that he wanted the Jets to bring in Taylor. He saw some potential there. Taylor can start games and not embarrass himself. That's all you want a backup quarterback to do. The next guy up is an old friend of the Jets. The quarterback of this team the last time they were relevant. Yeah, I'm talking about Ryan Fitzpatrick. Bring him back. Bring him in on a 1-year deal and say, look, we expect you to mentor this guy just like you mentored Tua. And again, Fitzpatrick has shown that he can play. It would be a great story. The beard comes back to give it one more go with the Jets. I'd love it. The next guy up is Andy Dalton. A guy who, when he first took over for Dak Prescott, really wasn't doing that well. Then he got the coronavirus, came back, and was playing really well. He's the one who led the Cowboys towards their almost getting to the playoffs. Is it a bad look that he couldn't beat the Giants? Yes. But the reality is a backup quarterback should never be in that position. All you want from the backup quarterback is a guy who's going to give you a chance to win whenever he's forced to play. In a perfect world, you never see the backup quarterback. Do you need a premium one? Yes. And I think Dalton can be that. Moving on now to a guy who really turned his career around this year, and that's C.J. Beathard. Before this season, Beathard was a garbage quarterback. Was 1-9 in games that he started. Had thrown just 12 touchdowns to 13 interceptions. He really wasn't that good. Then this year, when he's been forced to play, he's played well. He played well against the Eagles, played well against the Dolphins, beat the Cardinals. Beathard is a fine backup. The last guy on the list is last for a reason. Yes, this is going in order of preference. Everything is. Taylor Heinicke, when he was forced to play in relief of Dwayne Haskins against the Panthers, played well. Completed 12 of his 19 passes for 137 yards and a touchdown. I'd be willing to bring him in as the backup. Would I be 100% confident with it? No, that's why he's last. But I don't think he'd be bad. I don't think he'd be great, but I don't think he'd be bad. The Jets do need a running back. And there are some good ones available. Aaron Jones, Kenyon Drake, Todd Gurley, guys like that. But a couple years ago, the Jets paid for a marquee running back. His name was Le'Veon Bell. That ended about as bad as anyone could have imagined. Bell had a bad first season, didn't even make it through his second season. Yeah, Adam Gase muddied the waters. There's no question that he's more of the villain in that story than Bell is. But I don't think I can advocate for paying another running back an obscene amount of money. I'm not saying running back isn't important. I want the Jets to draft a running back in day 2. Let him form a committee with LaMichael Pirine and either Josh Adams or Ty Johnson. I think that could work, but I can't say that I endorse giving a guy like Jones, Drake, or Gurley a big contract. If they sign Aaron Jones, I'll be happy. I understand the talent that he is, and Lord knows the Jets need talent. I just think the better way for them to fill out their running back room is to draft a running back in day 2 of the draft and let him form a 3-headed monster with Pirine and either Adams or Johnson. So now let's get to wide receiver. An incredibly important position. The Jets have lacked a true number 1 wide receiver since Brandon Marshall. You take a look at what guys like Stephon Diggs and DeAndre Hopkins have done for Josh Allen and Kyler Murray. They've elevated their quarterbacks to new heights. You really need a true number 1 wide receiver to contend in this league. Look at the playoff teams and look at their number 1s. Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs. The Packers have Devontae Adams. The Seahawks have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. The Buccaneers have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. The Rams have Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. And the Bears have Allen Robinson. You need a number 1. And speaking of Allen Robinson, that's who I want first and foremost. This guy has had an incredible year for the Bears. Over 100 catches for over 1,200 yards and 6 touchdowns. In 2019, he was incredible, 98 catches for 1,147 yards and 7 touchdowns. If he can do all that with Mitchell Trubisky, imagine what he can do with a real quarterback. Robinson is the A1 guy at wide receiver. The next guy up is Chris Godwin. A guy who maybe didn't have the impact that you expected him to have this year with Brady, but look, there's only one football. And when you're dealing with guys like Mike Evans, Rob Gronkowski, Antonio Brown, O.J. Howard, Cameron Brate, Scotty Miller, all those guys, yeah, your stats are going to dip a little bit. But Chris Godwin has shown that he has what it takes to be a number one wide receiver in this league. In 2019, with Jameis Winston throwing to him, he made the Pro Bowl with 86 catches, over 1,300 receiving yards, and 9 touchdowns. He has what it takes to be a number one wide receiver. There's just no question about that. The next guy on my list may surprise you because he only played 5 games this year. Look, it does carry some risk, but before that, he had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. I'm talking about Kenny Golladay. In 2018, he had 70 catches for 1,063 yards and 5 touchdowns. The year after that, he made the Pro Bowl with 65 catches for 1,190 yards and 11 touchdowns. This year, he was on his way there, but he had a really bad hip injury that the Lions did not handle well. It does bring some risk, there's no question about that. You've got to make sure the medicals are all fine and dandy, but if the Jets were to bring in Golladay, I'd really like it. The next guy up may be higher on some people's lists, and that's okay. He's 4th on mine. If you want to have him 2nd or 3rd, that's okay. I just don't like him as much as the other 3. I'm talking about Corey Davis. This is by far and away Davis's best year. He picked a great time to have it when he's hitting free agency. He's always been really good, but this year, he's looked great. Finished with just under 1,000 receiving yards, over 60 catches. Like I said, this is his first borderline great season. That's why he's a little lower on my list than some people's, but I'd still really like it if the Jets brought him in. The last wide receiver to bring up is sorta kinda a reclamation project. Although he did have an underrated good season this year, Juju Smith-Schuster. He finished the year with over 90 catches for over 750 yards and 9 touchdowns. This guy is a former 1,000-yard receiver in this league. There was a time when it looked like he was going to be a superstar, the next Lynn Swann. Then Roethlisberger gets hurt, so he has a bad season in 2019. And this year, there were just so many mouths to feed in Pittsburgh. James Conner, Smith-Schuster, Eric Ebron, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, James Washington, Benny Snell. I think Smith-Schuster could get back to true number one form. Now let's move over to right guard. There's only one right guard available in free agency that I want. A guy who I've always liked. Coming out of Iowa, I love this kid. And he's been good ever since he's been in the NFL. And that's Brandon Sheriff. Through 16 weeks this year, according to Pro Football Focus, he has an 85.2 overall grade. That's the best grade he's ever had. The worst grade he's ever had is 72.5. I understand he has a little bit of an injury history. He hasn't played in 16 games since 2016. But the reality is, he is one of, if not the best right guard in the NFL. He'd be a massive improvement over Greg Van Roten. If the Jets can't get him, then you can draft an offensive guard and let him and Van Roten duke it out. Moving on now to right tackle. There are a couple guys who I wouldn't mind. The first is Taylor Moton. This guy has been a wrecking ball ever since he's been in the NFL. He's gotten better and better since coming out of Western Michigan. Through 16 weeks, according to Pro Football Focus, he has an 83.8 overall grade. He'd be a massive improvement over George Fant. Becton and Moton as your tackles. You don't have to worry about an edge rush. You also won't have to worry about an edge rush if you sign Darrell Williams. A very underrated part of the great Bills offensive line, which in and of itself is an underrated part of why they've been so successful this year. Williams had a bad year last year for the Panthers, had a 56.1 overall grade, went to the Bills on a 1-year prove-it deal, and he proved it. His overall grade went up to 79.5. That's the best mark of his career. And he's not a one-hit wonder either. 2019 was really the only bad year for him. He has injury concerns, there's no question. But if you can't get Moton, Darrell Williams is a damn good consolation prize. So now let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. I can hear Joe Caporoso now. What are you talking about? Offense. Always offense. Prop up the young quarterback. No. Defense matters too. Were you watching this team try to play defense? They gave up over 450 points this year. The worst mark in franchise history. They were a complete embarrassment. The reality is, best case scenario, this team isn't going to win 38-35 games. You can't expect a rookie quarterback to do that. You can't say to your offense, you have to go out there and score 30 every game because we have no defense. You've got to improve the defense a little bit. And I'm not going to go crazy with defense. There are only a couple positions that I want to go after. It should be more, but I'll get into why it's not in a minute. The Jets have needed a premium edge rusher for years. I think their last good one was John Abraham. That is way, way, way too long. Fortunately, there are some guys who can fill that role. The first one is Shaq Barrett. A guy who a lot of Jets fans wanted last year. I'm pretty sure I mentioned him last year. Last year he had 20 sacks. This year he only had 8. Only. 70.7 overall grade according to Pro Football Focus. Even though that's the worst mark of his career, it's still really, really good. The Jets may need to give him a massive contract, but you do it. Solve your edge rushing issue. The next guy is Hassan Reddick. No, I am not just saying that because he tore up the Giants in one of the greatest games that a defender has ever had. While that was really fun to see, this guy's had a good season since transitioning over to edge rusher. He came into the league as a middle linebacker and struggled. He was moved over to outside linebacker late last year, played well. Then this year, he put it all together. 73.1 overall grade. That's by far and away his best grade. He also has 13 sacks. He's behind Barrett because Barrett has more of a track record of success. Reddick is a one-hit wonder. But usually that's who you need to go after in free agency. I would have no problem with the Jets going after Hassan Reddick. If they want to go with a more experienced guy, Pernell McPhee would make sense. Not as good at getting to the quarterback as the previous guys, but he makes up for it in generating pressure and run defense. Very good run defender, good at hurrying the quarterback, 71.7 overall grade this year. It would be a little underwhelming for the Jets to sign him, but it would make sense. It wouldn't be a bad move. There are just better options. I'm not expecting the Jets to get the top option at every position. That's why I'm going through a bunch of guys. The last outside linebacker to talk about is Melvin Ingram. A guy who had his season cut short with an injury. But you know what? This guy is usually a wrecking ball. 72.3 overall grade this year. And no sacks. That's bad. But from 2015 to 2019, he never had less than 8 sacks in a season. You could get him on a 1-year prove-it deal, and you can say to him, hey, look, we'll let you finish the twilight of your career here if you play well this year. The Chargers are going with younger players. Ingram may be amenable to moving on from the only team he's ever known. The Jets do also need a middle linebacker to play alongside CJ Mosley. Yeah, you forgot about Mosley. He opted out of the season because of the coronavirus. You can't begrudge him for it, but it did stink to see it as a fan. The Jets have a lot of money tied up in Mosley. He's got to play well. The Jets do need to give him another linebacker to play with since Avery Williamson got traded. We never got to see that duo play. That kind of ticks me off. But they do need another middle linebacker. Unfortunately, there aren't any good ones in free agency. I don't have the list in front of me right now, but none of them are that good. The Jets are going to need to draft a middle linebacker. I'm okay with that. Let the older Mosley mentor the younger linebacker, I have no problem with that. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah would make perfect sense with the Seahawks pick. While I'm on the topic, the Jets could stand to add another safety, because Ashton Davis really didn't play well. But he was picked in the 3rd round just last year. I'm not ready to give up on him. Just like I'm not ready to give up on Zuniga. I'd be lying to you if I said I was 100% confident in him, but you do need to give them another season to prove their worth. Let Zuniga play opposite, hopefully, Shaq Barrett. Let Davis play opposite Marcus May. I don't mind that. I also don't really have a burning desire to sign a safety, since they traded Jamal Adams partly because he wanted a big contract. To then turn around and sign a guy like John Johnson or Justin Simmons or Keanu Neal to a big contract, I just don't like the look of that. So now let's get to cornerback. A position that Joe Douglas whiffed on last year. Pierre Desir and Quincy Wilson. I'm still not over it. The A1 guy that I want is Ronald Darby. Went to Washington on a 1-year prove-it deal, and Ron Rivera certainly turned his career around. Had probably his best season, 77.3 overall grade. I understand it's a little underwhelming if he's the best corner in free agency, but the Jets had the opportunity to get Byron Jones. They let him go to the Dolphins. I promise you, Ronald Darby's going to be the best we can get as Jets fans. Moving on now to William Jackson III. A guy who I've always liked. Even coming out of Houston, I really liked him. Had a down year for the Bengals in 2019, but last year, he really turned it on. 71.4 overall grade. People forget, his rookie year, he was absolutely incredible. He had a 90.2 overall grade. I'm not saying he's going to ever recapture that, but the Jets could do a lot worse than getting William Jackson. The next guy up is Shaquille Griffin. Very underrated player. Very consistent his whole career. Maybe he doesn't set the world on fire, but he's a consistent guy. In a perfect world, is he a number 1 corner? Probably not, but this is what happens when you punt an offseason. This is what happens when you build towards a future season. You're beholden to that season. Shaq Griffin would be fine. I wouldn't mind it. But no one's going to be mistaking him for Darrelle Revis anytime soon. The next guy up, you can make the argument, is better than Griffin. I have him lower because of the age. He's going to turn 31 in June, and that's Xavier Rhodes. Was signed to a 1-year prove-it deal by the Colts after 2 really bad seasons with the Vikings. Give Matt Eberflus credit. He got the most out of Rhodes. If Eberflus gets the Jets job, I'd expect him to bring over Rhodes. He's more of a household name. The reason I have him 4th is because, again, he's going to turn 31 in June. I'd rather go younger in free agency if I can. But if the Jets aren't concerned by age, they could also go after Jason Verrett. Verrett looked like he was going to be a really good corner in this league after his sophomore season. Then the injury bug bit him. from 2016 to 2019, he only played 327 snaps. The Niners stuck with him, though, and Verrett rewarded him. 77.4 overall grade. If Robert Saleh gets the Jets job, I'd expect him to try to bring over Verrett. If Eberflus can't bring over Rhodes, maybe he could bring over TJ Carey. A guy who's been really underrated his whole career, was decent with the Browns after he signed a big contract. Was he worth his contract? No, but he wasn't awful. He earned it with the Raiders. He was a good Raider. Again, 1 year prove-it deal with the Colts. Eberflus turned his career around. He's going to be 31 in July. Maybe Eberflus would try to bring in Rhodes and Carey. That would make sense. Normally, this would be where I talk about the NFL draft. But I can't do that here. There are just too many variables. The possibility of trading up is real, so I have no idea what picks the Jets are going to have. The possibility of trading for a veteran quarterback exists. I have no idea what picks the Jets are going to have. The Jets could also look to trade some of their picks for veterans that aren't quarterbacks. I could see cap-strapped teams looking to the Jets for that. There are just too many variables for me to accurately say what the Jets should do in the NFL draft. I'll say this. The NFL draft is going to start on April 29th. The morning of the 29th, you're going to get a New York Jets draft preview, where I'm going to go through all their picks, and I'm going to tell you what they should do with them. But as of right now, I just can't do it accurately. There are too many variables. If you made it this far, you are incredible. Thank you so much. You must have enjoyed something, so don't forget to hit subscribe. If you're listening on YouTube, like the video. If you have any questions, leave a comment on YouTube. Tweet at me at RealJacobValk. Regular episodes of The Jacob Valk Show are posted every weekday afternoon. I promise you that they're not as long as this is. There's just a lot to talk about with the Jets offseason. Been looking forward to it since the Broncos game. Until next time, I am Jacob Valk saying, who would you rather be? Wee Willie or Big Dave?